We are now ready to go look for potentially habitable planets. Not surprisingly, we kind of came up with the idea that we want to find something that's perhaps Earth-sized. Too large, and it means it's probably more like a mini Neptune or even a hot Jupiter. Too small, well, only in our dreams do we find anything too small. It's a little hard to find the things that are the size of the Earth to begin with. So our holy grail is something at about the size of the Earth that's getting about the same amount of sunlight as the Earth, that if it had similar sorts of greenhouse gases in it, it could maintain a stable environment with liquid water on its surface. Let's take a look at the known exoplanets and see where we might find such a thing. Here's a plot similar to stuff that we looked at before of exoplanets that have been discovered, and we're looking at two different things. We're always looking at orbital period, and we're either looking at the mass. The mass, as you might remember, is found if there's a radial velocity measured from it, and that the star is wobbling back and forth as the planet is moving around it. There we go, like this. Sometimes we can do that if we have the radial velocity. Sometimes we have discovered the planet in transit, and so instead we get a planetary radius. And occasionally we get both of them, and that's where we start to learn about things like the densities of planets. The things that you'll note are we see these things here, short periods, high mass, large size. These are the hot Jupiters that we talked about extensively. We see things that are out in here, and you don't see as many of them over here because we don't see them in the transit, so we know on their sides. But these are Jupiter-sized objects that are further out in the solar system, more akin to Jupiter on our own solar system, or although even there, they're not. They're closer in than our own Jupiter. What we're interested in are the smaller things. We want something that is the size of the Earth at the distance of the Earth, and the answer is not much going on here in the mass thing. There's pretty good cutoff here where we measure things that are more massive than this line, and we can measure things that are less massive if they're closer to the star because that makes the star wobble more. But there's a pretty good line here where we can't see things. Let's see about planetary radius, and it is even worse. So look at that. There's a pretty strong line right here where we just don't detect things that are as small or as low mass as the Earth at distances of the Earth. We can detect them when they're closer. In transit, we detect them when they're closer. Sometimes it's because they transit so many times because they're closer that we can stack up all the data. But things that are at the distance of the Earth and around something like the sun, the transits happen once a year, and you just don't get enough of them to see these things. So we really don't have any good targets to go after, except for one crazy trick. Like for the hot Jupiters, when we are trying to do spectroscopy of the objects, we wait for the object to pass in front of the star, and we then measure how much light was blocked by the object as it crossed the star. And there's a thin band on the outside of the object where it's passing through the atmosphere. So we measure the transmission of the light through the atmosphere. It's a very indirect, very tiny signal. And as you can imagine, the larger the object, I drew something here that's equivalent maybe to the size of Jupiter going around something the size of the sun. The larger the object, the larger the signal. Something the size of the Earth, it just has too small of a signature for us to be able to detect it. But what if we could cheat? Here's a cheat. Imagine that your star were more like the size of Jupiter, but the planet stays the same size as the Earth. The relative size of that planet is now much larger compared to the star, meaning that the signature of that transit, the total amount of absorption, is significantly higher. This happens in those low mass stars called M dwarfs that we saw when we were talking about the habitable zones. These are the lowest mass, lowest temperature stars. Interestingly, if the temperature of the star is lower, it also means that you have to be much closer to be in the habitable zone. So you're closer, it's easier to detect objects in both transit and radial velocity that are closer, and the relative signature is bigger. This is a fantastic cheat that allows us to examine what could be potentially habitable planets in an era when we're not quite technically there yet to be able to look at real Earth-like planets around real Earth-like stars. Several groups set out to look at many of the M dwarfs out in the sky to see if they had transiting planets. And by far, the best one, the most interesting one, and my favorite one, is the TRAPPIST planetary family. It gets its name from the survey that it was trying to detect it. TRAPPIST is transiting planet something telescope, probably, and it found around this one particular M dwarf a set of not just one, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 planets transiting one after another. If you look at a movie of the actual transits happening and the dimming of the stars, the transits happen, it's just crazy. It's just this one, this one, this one, and putting that all together is quite a feat. What's amazing about this is how packed they are around this M dwarf. This is the solar system to scale, Earth all the way down here, and Mercury, close in Mercury. The entire TRAPPIST system is in this little area. And if you compare it to Jupiter, to the real size of Jupiter, here's Jupiter with its moons, its 4 Galilean satellites we just talked about. The TRAPPIST system is a little bit bigger than the Galilean satellites, but not much. It's an amazing set of planets to be found orbiting this M dwarf. Most exciting, perhaps, is if you look at the density of the planet versus the illumination from the star and compare it to the Earth. So 1 times means 1 times the Earth's illumination, 1 times the Earth's density. That's the size of the Earth. And these sit right in this region between about Mercury and about Mars. Some of them are probably a little underdense. Look at D is a little bit underdense. Might mean it has a big puffy atmosphere, not really terrestrial-like. But E is approximately the size of the Earth. It's approximately the density of the Earth, and it's just a little bit less illumination than the Earth. It sits firmly within what we calculated would be a habitable zone around an M dwarf. That's what's attempting to be shown with this brown coloring up here and comparing to the blue in the solar system where the Earth is in the habitable zone. We think Mars is maybe really too far to really call it the habitable zone, so I might drop off my habitable zone here and maybe put it in something like here. And certainly TRAPPIST-1e is in the habitable zone, about the size of the Earth, about the density of the Earth. It's the closest thing you could possibly hope for that might be a planet of the Earth size in a habitable zone. Now, there are many problems with the idea that this might be habitable, one of which is that it's orbiting an M dwarf. It gets plenty of insolation, of sunlight, and it's warm enough that it would be compatible with having liquid water on its surface. But M dwarfs are chaotic. They have these massive flares, these big X-rays, and anything that was trying to be on the surface, including an atmosphere, could easily get blown away by all these. So maybe an M dwarf is a terrible place. The other interesting thing, of course, remember, is that the M dwarfs are, to be close to the M dwarf, you are probably going to be tidally locked. You are probably going to always have one side facing the star all the time, one side always facing the dark all the time, and this eerie region of perpetual twilight encircling the planet. So in no way would we call this an Earth analog, but it's worth taking a look. How to take a look? Well, because it is around an M dwarf, it makes a big enough signature that the spectrum of the atmosphere can be collected with the James Webb Space Telescope. If you remember, JWST has been looking at planets around other stars, but these are all hot Jupiters. Hot Jupiters, they're the easiest things to do. They're big. They have big signatures. Do them first. Make sure you know what's going on with JWST. And you see plenty of things that are spectral features around these things. Very beautiful things like water, carbon dioxide, quite clearly detected. TRAPPIST-1e, smaller, star is fainter. It's a little harder. The data aren't as good, but here they are. This is a James Webb Space Telescope spectrum between about 1 and 5 microns. Do you remember in those previous plots about spectroscopy of potential Earth-like planets, we often went to even further wavelength, but this is what you can get with James Webb Space Telescope. There's more starlight down in these regions and at longer wavelengths, so it's hard to do those longer wavelengths. And the spectrum shows, well, I think if it's up to me, I would say it shows absolutely nothing. Orange is the flat line model. And, you know, even though you see it going up and down a little bit here and there and wiggling around, say the flat line model works pretty well. They also do an Earth-like model. That's the gray line. And, there's just not good enough data to see anything except for right here. I think that there's a big enough deviation that from, I believe this is probably due to CO2, should happen right there, about 4.26 microns. That CO2 present in the Earth's atmosphere does not look to be as present there. They make a model based on putting in potential atmospheric things, and that's in blue, and it matches maybe a little better, and you can see it sort of reproduces some of these wiggles. But statistically, the blue model here and the orange model here are identical. You can't say which one's better. And the safest thing to say is, well, nothing really was detected around this very best planet. What's going to happen next? Well, people are going to beat this planet to death with the James Webb Space Telescope, I suspect, and try to get better and better data to get those error bars down so that maybe this blue thing could be distinguished from this orange thing. That requires observing transit after transit after transit after transit and stacking them all together. There are issues with the star having sunspots, equivalent of sunspots on these M dwarfs. They have even bigger ones. So there's this clever idea to try to observe the transit of a different planet right when this one is going across and understand the difference between the sunspots. It's going to be beaten upon. My bet is that we will come out in a couple years and the data will be utterly ambiguous, but it will be consistent with the idea that this planet has essentially no atmosphere. The atmosphere has been stripped away by the stellar wind, by the flares, by the X-rays, and we're looking at, if not a bare rock, then as close to a bare rock as we could possibly see. This was kind of our best hope. What happens next? There will be other planets that are observed with James Webb Space Telescope where people try, but I really don't think that we're going to have success in the near future with James Webb and habitable planets. I really think the task is going to come to this new telescope that's under development by NASA, HWO, Habitable Worlds Observatory. It's a large telescope. It has a crazy design where there's a big telescope and they fly a star shade, it's called, that has kind of a flower-like design. They fly it to basically block out the light of the star that's here, the center part of the light, and just let the light from the planets get by. It's crazy to imagine this, that you have to maneuver all these things in space to make it happen. It's supposed to fly in, I don't even know, 2040 maybe. And that's a long ways away. Nothing is ever early, so maybe it's going to be even later than that. It's going to be exciting. I do think that it has a chance of starting to find these smaller planets closer in or further out, or Earth-sized things around real G-stars or something like sun-like stars where we don't have the tremendous magnetic fields and flares, where you might really have a chance to hit it on something habitable. It's not coming soon, but it is coming. So I think the best that I can say is stay tuned. Cross your fingers for Habitable Worlds Observatory actually happening. It's expensive, and expensive things, they have a rough road. So we'll see what happens. In the meantime, I think we will continue to try to explore these things around M dwarfs, perfect our techniques, understand how this works. And I actually think that in the meantime, continuing to delve deeply into our own solar system is going to keep giving us insight into what is and might be out there in the rest of the galaxy.